listening to the Business and Tech Podcast, your go-to source for all the tech needs in your business. Now, here's your host, tech guru, and CEO, Jack Garzella.
Well, welcome to today's episode. Again, I have Rob Heitman. This will be, I believe, his second or third, if you've listened to the short podcast we've done with him. Basically, today we're talking about multiple teams. Now, we started out thinking this podcast would be exclusively about offshore and onshore teams, US and wherever, India, Europe, South America, wherever your development teams are. And we did talk to that. But we also talked quite a bit about the in the US now with remote teams and post-pandemic, a lot of people working from home. We expanded the conversation to cover those teams that might all be in the US or in the Americas, similar time zones, versus multi-time zones where you're dealing with India or again Europe or some other part of the world. So I hope you enjoy this. We do talk about how to be successful, both with communication requirements, delivering business value, testing strategies, code integration strategies, but also from a business perspective, how to keep on track with the project and know that it's moving forward correctly. Okay, well, here we go. Let's get into the podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us. Okay, well, we're going to start this second podcast with Rob, at least the second one that'll be published with Rob, number 2. Well, many more, I'm sure. Thanks for having me over. I'm actually at Rob's house today in Orlando. He's got the nice lake. Unfortunately, in Orlando today, it feels more like Salt Lake than it does.
It does. The weather is not what we would wish for.
The weather's not exactly what Florida would normally be. You can see how heavy of a jacket I'm wearing in Florida.
It's a great day for podcasting, though. Right? It's a great day for podcasting. I have sleeves. I have sleeves, which is more than you usually will see from.
No, so I just finished Top 1 training, coaching with JT and about 35 other of his associates that we do about every quarter. We get together to talk about our businesses and our problems. So Rob, we did it in Orlando this time, and Rob's right here in Orlando. So thanks for having us over and doing one in person for a change versus Zoom.
Yeah, well, it's nice. You know, it's been seeing people in little boxes for so long this last couple of years. So it's nice to see people in I haven't been in real life. So it's been a while. So yeah, we've made some changes.
So what we thought we'd talk about as we come out of this pandemic slowly, apparently, on and off, eventually getting out of it, but is mixed work teams, both offshore, onshore, as well as your remote teams that almost everybody has now. A lot of people had them before the pandemic, but now with the pandemic, everybody has some level of remote work, if not almost 100% remote work. So we're going to attack this from offshore, onshore initially, and then we'll talk more about mixed U.S. teams also, just how those teams would interact together and how some of these offshore, onshore principles can be applied to the mixed U.S. Workforce. So that's what we'll be doing, taking the offshore, onshore model and then applying it to the mixed U.S. workforce where you've got some on-site but mostly off-site and everybody kind of distributed. So we'll hit it from there. So Rob, I know in the last year and a half, give or take, you can correct me, but you've been doing a lot of, I won't call it firefighting, but fixing or helping straighten out some of these offshore, onshore projects. So you want to give us a little background on what you've been doing lately?
Yeah, I mean, most of that is, I think, what everybody's been facing, right? Sure. Because of the pandemic and because of the situation, great resignation, whatever people want to call it, right? Everybody's faced some resourcing shortages for tech staff. And what I mean specifically in the space I'm in is software development. So someone developing a software product. This doesn't, I mean, whatever we're talking about here, if it's what I'm sharing, it's not necessarily about IT teams or you know, your back office of, you know, DevOps, database wrangling. This is like people writing software, building an application. So if you're trying to get to market with a product, if you're trying to get out there with a new build of something, and you're trying to put a team together to do that, in 2022, post-pandemic, post-Great Resignation, you face a completely different challenge than you faced trying to put that team together in 2019 even.
Correct.
completely different challenge.
Yep.
And of course, a lot of people have had their teams fall apart in 2019 and have had to rebuild them because their business is trying to come back.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so yeah, firefighting is the right word for what we've been doing, absolutely, because we are, my team is a small onshore team that is working with companies to try to rebuild their capacity. And that doesn't mean we come in and do all of it. It means that we're helping consult and help them to build their team back up,
Sure.
or build their team up for the first time if it's a new startup. So, so yeah, they're navigating this fun new landscape that we're in. And
So in the old days, right, if I go back 20 years, even longer, but 15, 20 years ago, when we would mix offshore, onshore, we initially started having them do the off-hour stuff or some of the maintenance, right? And we'd do the new stuff in the U.S., but now it's really turned into a blended team, correct? Almost a 24-hour blended team. So.
Right, because 24-hour operations is kind of the norm now, right? And it is almost, people feel like you're not taking things seriously if you can't be responsive to an issue in the middle. Even a software development issue, I need this feature and I need it to go live tonight. Can you be responsive to that at all hours? And we've had an interesting history, and we talked about the elephant thing. We've had an interesting history of being the offshore team for people in Kenya and people in India.
World, right?
So we're the overnight team for. So sometimes it's not just always like we're in the U.S. so we're thinking of it U.S. centrically, but it's not always like that, right? So we are in a place now where when you're building a team or reforming a team, the discrepancy though between U.S.-based resources and pretty much almost anywhere else based resources can be very steep. And we're talking about the difference between like $300 to $400 an hour down to like 20s to 30s of dollars an hour. And it's a huge range. So the biggest thing we see people come in and ask day one is just, what am I supposed to be paying for development? I mean, I have all these quotes. They're all, it's like the solar industry.
So would this be an owner or a CIO who would be asking you this?
Well, usually it's whoever signed the checks, right? So it's whoever's got financial responsibility for why we're spending so much money that cares about that.
Okay.
Your engineering manager may or may not care if he's getting his stuff done, but it's depending on how they're incentivized. But yeah, it's a money question, and so that's where things are different now, because it used to be closer. $100 versus $50 or whatever. Now it's a big range, so you have to kind of combat that, right?
Well, our rates have gone up.
Hugely,
right?
Yeah.
And then offshore stayed the same or potentially reduced as there's more quotas worldwide.
Yeah. And if you think about why things have changed in the United States, right? Is our market for software developers is largely controlled by what the Valley does, right? What Google does and Apple does and FANG companies do, and they're driving those numbers, right?
15-20% of everybody.
Right, Cisco, Oracle, and they're setting the bar. And I have friends working for those companies, senior roles, admittedly, but they are making what we historically would have considered executive salaries, and I think that's great. I think that's awesome that people in software development are finally able to be
one of the team.
Be a full member of the executive team, because that is critical to the industry and the retention and all the things that matter with that. But it also sets an expectation for everybody else in the U.S. that I see that guy over there. He's working remote. He's making $300,000 a year, $400,000 a year. He's got all these guarantees and all these benefits. I write code too. Why don't I have that? And it kind of creates a lot of pressure on that market. Also, there's just a lot of startups with a lot of VC money because of what's going on with the fact that the market's pretty hot right now, as things roar back in some sectors and don't roar back in others. But there's money to be spent, so somebody's trying to burn through a few $1 million in venture capital.
In 6 months.
They may not mind.
Right.
They may not mind. So they're happy to snap up a competent resource and set almost maybe an unrealistic expectation for what they can get paid, vis-a-vis the same dev who's been doing the same thing for maybe more years in India and is making $65 an hour and pretty impressed by that. But so it's a very complicated world for people who are like, what does this really cost? This guy writes JavaScript, that guy writes JavaScript.
Well, it's not even a cost thing to me, because to me, when I look at these contracts or looked at these contracts in the past, to me it's been about, can they deliver? Do we have a project process and a requirements process and a testing process that if these guys are going to be, let's use your number, $65 compared to, let's go with 180, I'm, 3 times less, right? A third of the cost. But am I going to have to spend that extra 2/3 fixing their stuff, or they wrote the wrong thing overnight because the requirements weren't clear? So I had to pay attention as much to that as the cost itself. So how are you these days dealing with that, at least in your world?
Well, I think you segued exactly into what the first thing we go into is, which is although the thing that drives the conversation is why does it seem to be this huge range in price right now, the reality is there really a difference in deliverable? Is there really a difference in what you can get out of that team?
Right.
And it is unfortunately one of those things where you do kind of need someone who is a bit of a specialist in software development to consult and to contract on that and make sure that you get down the right path because of what you just described. You have to understand how much of your spend is coming from the developer and what you spend on the developer, and how much of your spend is coming from you didn't specify what you needed correctly, or you didn't you got too much churn in your developers, so they keep having to spend more time spooling up, and you're losing a lot of time on spool up, right?
They're walking down the street for the next 10 grand, right?
Right. So if somebody's going to stick around for $100 an hour, but they're going to leave in 3 months for $65 an hour, that's not really a choice. Like, they could be able to do exactly the same thing, and they're as a resource they can do the same tasks, but you want the one who's going to stick around and keep stuff in their head and be useful to your team. And you also want people who, in the space we always talk about soft skills, right? Like people skills and whatever. And there's a lot to it, but essentially there's kind of a line where communication and being able to connect with everyone up and down the requirements chain makes things go a lot faster. And then when you get to a certain point, it's like, no, now everyone has to write everything down in super minute detail, and now everything goes a lot slower because everyone has to completely express I mean, all the projects we've done together, right? Like,
we're mid-level requirements.
Like, we talk telegraphically, and you're like, make one of these, and we go make the thing, and right? Then it saves a lot of time. If you had to sit down and make a complete requirements document and share it out and then have it go through multiple layers of management, that's hugely expensive.
Lately, are you working, and when I say lately, the last 18 months, 2 years, are you working more with teams that are, say, scoped at 15 or less people to keep that more under control? Because, in the past, I've had offshore organizations, 200-300 people, but again, it's been more stovepiped. Your job's to do this, your job's to do this, your job's to do this, and we're not having to write a lot of detailed requirements for them because it's turning the crank on a lot of things, whether it's bug fixes or operations or code testing. We used to, back in the day, do a lot of our code testing offshore, right? Let them test it overnight while we code it during the day, kind of thing. So what are you guys seeing today? Are you doing?
You're absolutely right about that. I think we've always been on the same page about this, which is that there's a very small maximum functional team size for developing anything. And I don't know exactly what the sweet spot is. I think it's like 5 or 6. Some people think it's more like 15, 16, but it's definitely not much more than that. And when I go into a place and they have a team that says, we have 30 developers on this, I'm like, okay, no. This isn't going to work. We know this isn't going to work because you can't. That's like one of those kung fu fight scenes where like everybody attacks, but nobody can get the good guy because they're all fighting each other more than they're him, right? So
not to cut you off here, but let me make for everybody listening. You do have to be careful with some of these firms because a lot of them will put one good guy with 5 entry-level guys, and you got to make sure that the firm you're dealing with, you don't need 5 A guys, but you don't want 1 A guy and 5 C guys that just started.
Yeah, and the model has changed, which is great. Some of the companies that are out there now that we've had the most success with are very much sort of a shopping cart of developers, right? Where you aren't just working with a team manager who brings an unknown group of resources who are faceless to you. Yeah. You are working with individuals who are known to you. You're working with those individuals through an offshore team and through management, and they're handling all of the HR and all of the everything. And obviously there's things you have to be very careful of there around misclassification, making sure that they are working as contractors if you're a US-based business. But the model is so much better now because you know who you can see, I want that developer because they are experienced in my stack, and interview them personally and get them on your team and make commitment over time. That wasn't there in 2019.
No.
Or at least if it was, I couldn't find it. And now it's the norm. Now it's like what most of the better services
most
offer.
Of the firms aren't working that way. You might have been applying one, but you had to search.
Yeah. And they didn't have a very deep bench. Now you've got these folks that have huge benches, and they're like, we can find you somebody. And
well, I think they've learned how to work with us too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's great.
There's a lot of wasted money in offshore. A lot of wasted money. I mean, there's some good stuff done, but there's also a lot of wasted money.
So the successful teams we're working with, the ones who are really just killing it, just absolutely killing it, have their small, closely held development manager, product manager, whatever. Those are all the traditional roles that stay inside the company, and however they're, whether it's remote or it's on site, it's still like those people are all closely held long-term employees. Typically, then they can fan out to somebody like us to provide some development guidance on a senior consulting level for a long term, and then they can also fan out to individual resources this way, and they're killing it.
They're doing really well. So let's put some structure around this for everybody now that we've kind of talked through some of the pros, cons, issues, challenges, good and bad. So I've got a new app. I think it's going to take, wouldn't you like to know? Just kidding. So and there's actually one I'm thinking of, but it's already been started, and they are using a mixed model like we're talking about. They have a couple of, I think 3 or 4. It might be a little bigger now, but as of a couple months ago, 2 months ago, it was 3 or 4 onshore, and then they had about 12 offshore, give or take. Some of those were testing, so they weren't all coders. A lot of them were testing, So, but my point is here, the point I want to make is, so I've got an app, I've got $1 million or $500,000 or $1.5 million of VC money or angel money, whatever. I want to go do this. So I know I can't hire 3 guys in the U.S. I might be able to get one and give him equity if he's a buddy of mine or knows somebody. So what's my process of going through this? How do I define what I want? Number one, right? So who do I look to, or what's the best way to find a firm? And then we'll go into some of the project management as a third step.
Yeah, so if you're starting from zero and you don't have a relationship with somebody like you or me or whatever who at least has done this before.
You can call us.
If people can call us, that's fine. We will consult. But if you don't have that, then I think if you're doing it on your own, the first step is to assess what capabilities you do have.
Yeah.
So if you do not have, again, the key fields of a product management person and a development management person, if you don't have an engineering manager and a product manager, you have to solve that first. Like, you will not get any further by just, and we see people trying to get further frequently by just
writing out what they want.
By going straight to the dev, right? So like, exactly where you described, I'm going to go on Turing.com or whatever, and I'm going to find some devs, and I'm going to pick up the phone and call them. And the thing that is problematic about that is that those devs probably are not going to be with you for life, and they are going to make choices, and they're going to
get the project done,
to achieve the goal, to do what you say on your schedule and whatever. And they absolutely should. It is unlikely that they will somehow backfill the need for having an overall product vision or having an overall engineering process. And which products did you choose in your stack, and why did you choose them, and will they be easy to resource? So, like, that's the stuff that most people, they go straight to the dev, and that's...
the only place I see that's even feasible is a pure prototype. But that's a throw it against the wall prototype, because you may have to throw all that code away, because then you do hire your architect, your lead developer, and he's like, why did they pick that stuff, right?
Exactly, and that's and yeah, prototyping is one way to do it too, and it's not my area of expertise, but I do see that being a valid thing that especially well-funded startups can do, where they can just be like, we're just going to build an MVP, and we have the full expectation we're going to throw it away.
Right.
And we just want to get product market fit. We don't care about a line of this code, and I just want to validate it. And that's a different problem than building the product that you intend to run and live with. The only reason I tend to stay away from that why I don't get involved in those kind of things is because our situation with
Well, you and I don't like to shortcut anything, so I'm just kind of laughing because you and I like to do things right, not shortcut.
yeah, we don't like shortcuts, and that's truly it. Like, no, we don't. And so, but it's not even a shortcut. It's like the liability, and I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but that approach gets a lot of people sued.
Okay.
And
gotcha. You said you had this, but you don't, right? Because you go for your next round of investment. They think the thing's ready to launch to 10,000 users, and you're like, no, I got to start from scratch.
Yeah, you're in a space that has compliance issues, or you violate somebody's patent, some IP. Yep. Very seldom are folks who you're contracting to just write software, are they aware of things like IP rights or whatever? Yeah. And you can get yourself in some hot water. And we very frequently have been called when somebody's in that hot water, right. And they're like, we built the MVP, now we have to throw it away, help. Right. Yeah. And we have to get rid of these 8 issues in order to move forward. And that, I think I don't know how common the story is. Again, it's like from my world, it seems common. It's not 2 days of work,
it's weeks, potentially even months, depending on what it is, but at least weeks, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly, depending on what it is, it could be a lot. And so, if you can start off as you mean to go on, I think, and I think the venture community respects that, right?
Well, again, if you're a seasoned, like the guy I was talking about, this is his 3rd one, right? And he's had exits over 100 million several times, so he knows what he's doing, right? He knew what processes to put in place, whatever. Right. So I've been watching him because he's been successful a few times, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'm watching some of my brethren. I live in Salt Lake on Silicon Slopes. Some of them are doing really well, some of them are failing because of the issues and their initial rollout of their app and the initial approach, not only to development but the marketing rollout with that and matching those two together. And it's sometimes a pretty big train wreck.
Yeah, and that's one thing that you do tend to have out of getting a really strong product manager to begin with, is typically a strong product manager with a resume of doing that in the past is going to know how to work with marketing and know how to work with sales, so that there's a close correlation between what sales is selling, what the marketing says they're going to sell them, and what is actually in the product. And otherwise, you frequently have a big disconnect there. So, I mean, that product manager role, I think, is the most key to do in your own company. So if you're starting off with something, even if you don't think you need that yet, I think you do. I would say get that, and then once you have those roles.
Yeah, if you haven't been around the block, you better have a project manager / product manager, right? And they can be the same person initially. I still recommend getting a lead dev in some fashion, even if it's part-time. Even if it's part-time.
And typically, if that's an interesting one, because I think we've seen very clear cases, both of us have, where the engineering manager and lead dev are the same person, and sometimes the engineering manager and lead dev are different people, or you don't have one or the other. Right. But if you have a super great lead dev, you can get away without an engineering manager for a while. If you have a super great engineering manager, and we've also seen, like one of my old employees was a lead dev for my company and now is an engineering manager for another company, and he wanted to make that change in his life. And it's typically it's the same kind of person. It's just which part of what you do are you leaning into.
Okay, so we've got our progression here. We've got our app or our whatever we're building or our huge enhancement ready. We've got some base requirements, right? Maybe we did some stuff in Lucidchart or PowerPoint, but we got some ideas for the screens. We vetted our idea. We found a product manager. We found engineer / developer, whatever, at least part-time or full-time. Now we're going to go find that offshore firm and put what processes do we need to put in place as we do that.
Yep. So the processes you need in general, and hopefully your engineering manager, lead dev knows these very well. And if they don't, we can help with that. But it's the first thing you need to have, I think, locked down in all cases, and I've never seen you not lock this down, is you want to have a solid code repository that everything gets checked into, that has some kind of orderly pull requests or whatever your system is. I kind of like GitHub. We do kind of that model, but however you're doing it,
what are the base tools?
The base tools you're going to have to ensure that visibility of what the devs do.
Right.
And that's like more than what they do. You need to have visibility of what they do. And the worst.
And GitHub auto measures it for you.
Exactly. And the worst mesh, and GitLab is great too. I just don't use it as much, but it's awesome. And GitLab is great because it's a full stack. It has everything from like CI/CD all the way. So that's really cool. But some of the worst messes we've gotten involved in are things where people had the tools and they didn't use them. So just having GitHub isn't a magic wand. You have to you have to actually use the tools, and having a good process for no matter who's contributing to your product, no matter where they are, that we see what it is, we know who did it, we know why they did it, we know what business requirement that connected to as a story in your whatever you're using for requirement management, and that can be a very simple card wall. It doesn't have to be something super crazy, but something you can see. Yes, product required this, we did this, this went in the product. And then 2 years later, when somebody is scratching their head and kind of, WTF, they can look and see, this was like this because this fills this core requirement of our product. And you got to start that from day one, because you don't want to be 2 years, 3 years down the road and be like, let's start improving on this. It's not going to work.
Yeah, and David and I on the aviation side do it all the time, because the product's, the core business logic's been out there 10 years. Now, we did rewrite the majority of the code in the last 3 or 4 years. But we'll go back and go, why did we put that in there? And then we'll be able to go back in the repository. Rob does have a dog.
There will be dog noises on this podcast.
I'm surprised there aren't more so far. But no.
If we have to.
There we go. We were going to do this outside, but it's just too cold, and I think it's actually raining now. So anyway, so we will do that all the time. We'll go back in and we'll actually look at that code commit and figure out, why did we do that? Who did it? What time frame was it? What product manager approved it? Or what requirement was it? Because there's so many things that we have to deal with in compliance, because most of them are compliance issues, not so much GUI issues, right? Why did we put this rule in the code? Oh, because the EASA requires that, even though the FAA doesn't, right? That kind of thing.
Right. I mean, your business is so heavy with business logic for doing that in the aviation business, it's there's everything. And the other sector we work in that's like that, of course, is healthcare, which similarly, there's a compliance reason for a lot of crazy stuff. And there's, typically a lot of things. I was just working on something this past week where it would have been such a simple solution to use something like Amazon SNS to send some notifications out. But PHI, people's private health information. So we have to make sure that in addition to using these commonly available things, we also have to encrypt all the data again, a second time. There needs to be encryption inside the encryption to make sure that this. So it's like we find ourselves rediscovering a bunch of things, and I think that you have the right of it, which is just that once you have those basic processes in place, then you have created a lot of air to do everything else right. And at that point, then it's up to your team, right? Because when you hire that team, and based on what technology they're using, the details you're going to figure out together. The details aren't the same for anybody. It's the language you're using, the tooling you're using, what you use to compile, what you use to do continuous integration.
Variable depending on what you're trying to deliver.
Different every time, and you let your team figure that out. But as long as you have those ironclad rules that whatever you do, we know why you did it. We know what you did, and we know why you did it. And we have tooling around that we're going to keep for the duration of this product.
Testing strategy on top of that to make sure things don't break.
Right. So. Because it gets into something that is also another issue that we keep seeing with the commoditization of development, whether offshoring or just consultancies, is that developers don't have a lot of context. A lot of them come and go, and there's a lot of churn. So it is not likely right now, like statistically likely, that you're going to get a dev who's going to be there for years and years. Maybe a lead dev, maybe if you really compensate that person, but more likely a dev is going to have a lifetime at your company and a couple of years max, right? So you have to plan for that churn, and you have to also plan that means somebody else is going to spool up, and for them to spool up, they need to see what was done before. So making that like your guide star for all of this is definitely a smart way to go.
Okay, we're back. We took a quick break to deal with little doggy there. All good. Keep it casual. So anyway, coming back to this. So the lessons there and all that noise we just made for the last 5 minutes is have your code in a repository where you know where it's at. People are actually using the tools, both for code check-ins, who did what requirement they are attached to, as well as now I want to get into a little bit of the testing, because you have manual testing and you can do automated testing, and you can spend a lot of money on automated testing, and if your app changes a lot quickly, that can get expensive. I typically have not spent a lot of money on automated testing. It's burnt me a few times, but our app changes significantly month to month. So we end up doing a blend of core testing on the business logic, but the UI testing tends to be a little bit more manual because we're constantly changing that. So I don't know if you want to go into that just a little bit on how much or little of that you should have in the beginning, at rollout time versus 10,000 users, right? Obviously at 10,000 users, it's got to be a lot tighter.
Yeah, so that's the backside of it, right? Is like, how do you make sure that once you get a little bit of maturity on this product, how do you make sure that you keep that maturity and don't slide backwards?
Right.
Right. So it's the opposite problem from what we were talking about starting it up. It's like now, like, how do I
multiple teams still?
Right. Still got the same development situation. Now you've maybe you've got this is when you get more up to that 15-person team kind of thing you're talking about, and hopefully it's divided up into like a few smaller teams, front end, back end, that kind of thing. But so then you're at a point where ensuring quality matters. So one of our clients is about 3 years on in a product that it's the second or third generation of the product, but this version is about 3 years old, and they are exactly in that place where right now they have a lot of clients on this, and it is business critical for those clients, and it can't go backwards.
Right.
So this is where it would have been great if you had spent that time all along doing some automated testing. And this is the stuff where we actually can provide a lot of unique value in terms of the consulting we do, which is to help the dev teams once you have them. The reason you have us around or somebody like us is because we have very senior devs who know, like, this is enough testing, this is not enough testing, this is the tool you should use.
Right. How much code they changed and what critical areas.
So that's very hard for somebody to guess at if you don't have a lot of coding experience.
Especially as a new developer.
Right. So having some folks around who have some extensive coding experience and have seen a lot of that dynamic.
Familiarity with the app.
Right, can provide a little bit of hourly consulting and say, do this this right way. But even if you don't have access to that, if you don't have somebody like that around, guess. You will do better to guess than to than to do nothing, right? Nothing is bad. Nothing is absolutely bad. You want the dog agrees. Nothing is bad. You want to do something, and I think, like for the work we do in JavaScript products, which is a lot of the world right now, is there's a lot of JavaScript out there. The most important thing that we do is unit testing, and full stack testing, and being able to have like these headless testing, things like Cypress and whatever that can actually click on stuff in your app, and those are great, but they're very hard to maintain. I know you've seen this before. You've done those before.
That's why I don't spend a lot of money.
They're extremely maintained. Right.
They're moving,
Right. So if
we're adding a new button.
You spend. I mean, it can actually. Maintaining the test suite for something like that can become more expensive than maintaining the actual app. And this is a problem in aviation, around like building an airplane, right? It's like moving this bolt is 3 years of paperwork, right? So and it can get like that. So for us right now, it's like, starting from day one, we do really recommend that everybody make sure they pack pretty good unit tests around everything and practice as much as they can. Practice test-driven development. I mean, everybody will say that word. Most people pay lip service to it. We don't always even do it. We joke a lot about like README-driven development, sales-driven development, because a lot of times that's what does drive things. But if you can write a test first to say this is what the outcome of this would be successful, and write a unit test for that, have the code figure that out, and when you put this in the database, you should get this out in this report, and look at it from a code perspective.
That's exactly right, because I look at the business logic testing as more critical than the user interface, right? If a button's slightly off or the text is overlapping, we can fix that overnight, right?
Absolutely.
But if the compliance engine is broke, the billing is wrong, the profile data for the person is wrong, that's way worse than just having some overlapping text on a screen we can fix overnight. So that kind of thing, definitely got to work through that. So if they're new, they should ask around locally, have a few lunches to find some firms or find some people that have have some knowledge, because if you've been around the block, you kind of know where to go look. Right?
Sure, and if you're VC backed, probably some of your VC firms are going to have real recommendations in the space, right? Usually we are referred through our network of portfolio companies and things that reach out to us and say, hey, I got a company over here that's struggling with this, and we're not the only ones, right? Must be, and some VCs kind of even operate their own kind of consultancies around what we do.
Some of them have little
incubator units in them. So if you are connected with a VC and you're at that point, then you probably know some people already. Just ask your venture network, and if you are not, then at that point you just Yelp. You just you just go out there.
Scream. Where do I find them?
Yeah. I think honestly that is it. It's just go out on the internet, but ask for that thing. Say, look, I'm building a team and I need some help figuring out some of these processes, whatever. Because it's a different question if you say I'm building an app and I need someone to write my app.
And I totally recommend you network in town or whatever, because talk to other CEOs, talk to other startups, talk to other CIOs, just give them a call, take them to lunch, whatever, get some advice. Try to find people that aren't super big. You don't want to be talking to GM and Ford if you're rolling out a new app to consumers, right? Wrong thing. Go talk to people that are kind of in that space.
That space. And we always find that whenever we're working with a business that has a strong network in their industry and has a strong network in their again, like with the other portfolio companies, whatever they might be associated with, whoever their ecosystem is, then people who are isolated from that ecosystem, because we're always very. It's a waste of time for me to go out there and shop for a great offshoring firm when your company already has a discount relationship with Turing or somebody. What? Just use them. You already have a relationship. So
I mean, if they're vetted, there's not going to be too much difference.
Absolutely.
What you don't want to try to do is vet from scratch without any references or just winging it with internet searches. That's never been good.
Yeah, no, that is exactly it, and that's
because you're going to get 1 million emails. I get 10 emails, maybe not a day anymore, but at least a week. I get 10 to 20 emails. I can build your app. I can fix your website. I can give you developers. I can do this cheaper. It's all junk. Now, some of those firms may be legit, but do not answer those emails. Go do your own research and
it's got to be 10 or 20 a day for me with the hey, we sell offshoring, whatever, can we help you? And something must have happened in my career now, because I don't get any more recruiter spam asking to hire me. I get everybody asking to sell me people, and I'm like, well, okay, hold on, wait. I do work for hire too. You can call me about those, but it's very much like don't dig in your spam. Not that all cold emails or whatever are wrong, but networking is far more important.
Yep. So let's back up on this. Let's kind of review. So we're gonna roll out some kind of application. We're going to have some base requirements and hopefully a couple of pictures, even if they're just in PowerPoint.
Right.
We're going to go find our product manager, probably first, or an engineering manager, but you probably need both very quickly. Within a month, you're going to need both, even though you might start with one versus the other. And then, and it depends on how much money you've got. If you've got $100,000, you're going to do this like that and try and get something up, versus if you've got $500,000 or $1 million up front, you can get a little more done a little quicker with a few more people, right? And then we're going to go get the infrastructure in place. Again, the code repositories, the testing tools, the rollout tools, the cloud setup, right, for at least our testing environment if we're not going to prod yet, that kind of thing. We're ignoring marketing, we're ignoring sales. I might do that in some other podcasts on the business side, but this is a tech side podcast today. Right. And then we go find a firm that we want to work with, or partner with a firm that has a U.S. offshore relationship already, and then run that project and hopefully grow with it, right? And then the process management around that, to your point, is just those daily check-ins. You've got to watch it daily, right?
Yep. I do recommend watching everything daily, and I mean that should be somebody's job, engineering manager, whoever is doing some daily stand-ups, especially with the offshore team. We have found lately, and we've got really good success with, and I know we have in your projects too, is just real-time messaging, Slack or whatever,
Oh,
can solve a lot of that.
Slack up,
so you can kind of skip a lot of the structured
Teams,
check-ins,
whatever
the
you're
synchronous
using,
check-ins, and there's a big buzz, right? We'll do a whole session on async versus sync at someday, right? Because that's like a big question. But if you don't have your finger on the pulse every day, even at 5 people times $65 an hour over 4 days, you could spend a lot of money going the wrong direction really quickly, and then you spend the time on
Doing that to go back.
And what I'm seeing more in the VC, I'll just say the startup world or growth world, is hitting your dates and hitting your feature list is more important than the cost in a lot of cases. Now, if you're, again, I'm talking slightly more mature, meaning you've got it out there, you might have 100 to 1,000 users and you're trying to grow to 10,000. Now it's important to hit those milestones that you've promised your customers and your investors for that matter, because normally they're tied to revenue or they're tied to some growth metric, even if it's not revenue that you need to get to, right, to get there. So so being able to watch that daily is just critical. You just cannot assume the work's getting done correctly. So and I'm working through JT's organization. I talked to a lot of people. In fact, the one came up today. They wanted to create an app. They grabbed me and another person in the hallway. We started talking to them, and we killed the whole idea. Not because the app was a horrible idea, but this person had absolutely no experience running this stuff out. So we said, if you want to go down this path, go find a partner that's done this before, because you've never done anything in IT, and you're building an app that's not exactly in your space, even though it's a good idea.
So you need that expertise to succeed, and we'll believe in it, and we'll fund it. And and you're absolutely right. And I don't not to tease too many future things, right? But we have
tease away.
So when somebody, as you mentioned, VCs, customers, pretty much anybody who's got money on the line is very interested in the big deliverables, hitting the big deliverable on the date. That's where everybody's focus should be. And we see a lot of times companies that get very focused on their sprint by sprint, week by week metrics, and they're very much like, did I hit my goal this day? Did I hit my goal that week? And everybody, it's like the driving thing. You want to look focused down the road, right? So we'll I know we'll spend more time on that particular thing.
Says, as we hit our function points today, start looking elsewhere, because that's a metric that a lot of tech people like to use that means nothing to the actual delivery of the app. Because I can have function points that have nothing to do with the actual delivery of a feature. I tried to use that for about a year and a half, and it was not good. It's not horrible. But it's 1 point in your status checks.
Yeah, we have a great recipe for for using function points, story points to especially for estimating. It's hugely valuable for estimating. But then people use it for metrics to say, are you as a developer, are you hitting your goals, whatever. And what you're actually measuring is you're measuring the efficacy of all that other stuff in the business, right? Like how good was our spec vis-a-vis what you built or whatever. Like you're not measuring the developer's output.
But if it was the wrong thing, I got to start over anyway, right?
Yeah. If you find an issue with a developer, especially like as we're talking about these, like if you source basically a stranger to you, somebody that you sourced through an offshore firm, that you saw a resume, you interviewed them once, and you're bringing this person on your team, you will make your decision as to whether or not that person will pass probation, whether or not to keep that person for a long term, based on what they do in what happens in their code reviews and what happens with their how quickly they can convert an assignment to output. It's not going to be, I estimated this at 3 points, did you do it in 4? Like that's not going to be a way to measure anybody, right? It's not going to work. You can try, it's not going to work.
So anyway, that's just a little tidbit. We'll cover that some other time. A little digression that may even get cut out. We'll see. But no, it's important to not get what's the word I'm looking for? Hoodwinked on the wrong metrics to actually get your delivery done. That's all I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
So I'll be back in a few weeks here in Florida. Now that the pandemic's lifting, my clients are actually wanting us on site a little more, and I have a ton of clients down here in Florida, as well as a lot of events down here. So maybe we can be actually outside next time.
The next time we will make a point of having a nice day. We will sit by the pool, and we will have a much better backdrop.
That's right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll talk to Rob. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming
I'd have you introduce the dog, but he decided to go take a nap now.
The dog's done with us.
Yeah, so he's had enough. Yeah, he's like, you're ignoring me. All right, thanks a lot, everybody.